speak therein for up to 10 minutes each.
Mr. President.
The Senator for Vermont.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I want to concur with what Senator Schumer said. And what he said goes beyond economics. It goes beyond the desperation that tens of millions of working families are facing. It goes beyond the struggles of the people of Vermont or Kentucky. And let me just make it clear for the Majority Leader that 10 out of the poorest 25 counties in the United States of America are located in Kentucky. So maybe my colleague, the Majority Leader, might want to get on the phone and start talking to working families in Kentucky and find out how they feel about the need for immediate help in terms of a $2,000 check per adult. And I have the strong feeling that the people of Kentucky will respond no differently than the people of Vermont or New York. This last poll that I saw had 78% of the American people saying that they wanted and needed that type of help. But this discussion, frankly, is not just about the economic struggling of working families in this country. It's not just the massive levels of income and wealth inequality. It's about basic democracy. Now, what we have to do here on the floor, whether it's Senator Schumer or Senator McConnell or me, we got to talk in legalese. That's the language of the United States Senate, and the stuff sounds pretty complicated to the average person. But all that Senator Schumer and I are asking of the Majority Leader is a very simple request. Allow the members of the United States Senate to cast a vote. If you want to vote against $2,000 checks for people in your state, vote against it. I see Senator Toomey here. He has been clear about it. I suspect he will vote against it. I respect his opinion. But all that we are asking for is a vote. What is the problem? In the House, over two-thirds of the members of that body, including 44 Republicans, voted to say that at this time of economic desperation, working families deserve help and they deserve a $2,000 check. And as Senator Schumer just indicated, we have a very unlikely ally in President Trump. Nobody here has disagreed with Trump more times than I have. And yet here is what the leader of the Republican Party says. He says $2,000 ASAP. So even on this issue, amazingly enough, the President of the United States is right. So what all of this comes down to, my fellow Americans, is not even whether you agree with Senator Schumer and myself and 78% of the American people, or you agree with Senator McConnell, and I suspect Senator Toomey, that's fine. It's called democracy. We have differences of opinion. All that I am asking is give us a vote. What's the problem? Allow the United States senators to cast a vote as to whether or not they are for the $2,000 check or whether they're against it. We will need, as I understand it, 60 votes to win. That's a big hurdle. I don't know that we're going to win. There are a number of Republicans, to their credit, who have said they're ready to vote for it. I suspect there may be more, when given the opportunity, who will vote for it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we will lose. I think that would be unfortunate. But all that I am asking for right now is give us the opportunity to vote. What is the problem with that? So, Mr. President, with that, I will now go to Senate legalese and say, quote, I ask unanimous consent that at 11:30 a.m. on Thursday, December 31st, the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of H.R. 9051 to provide a $2,000 direct payment to the working class, that the bill be considered, read a third time, and the Senate vote on passage of the bill without intervening action or debate. Further, that if passed, the motion to reconsider be considered, made, and laid upon the table. Further, that immediately following the vote on H.R. 9051, the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of the veto message on H.R. 6395, that the Senate immediately vote on passage of the bill, the objections of the President to the contrary notwithstanding, with no intervening action or debate.
Is there objection?
Mr. President.
The Senator for Pennsylvania.
Mr. President, reserving the right to object, let me start by pointing out we are not in the same place that we were in back in March. Our economy is in nothing like the situation we faced during a moment in March when this body came together and voted unanimously, I believe, for the most extraordinary aid package, financial stimulus bill, however you care to characterize it, in the history of the world by far. Remember, where we were was we had closed down the economy. To a very large degree, the American economy had stopped functioning because state governments around the country decided they had to close it down. We can discuss, we can argue about whether that was a good decision or not, but given the limited knowledge we had about the nature of the COVID-19 threat, it was deemed to be the right thing to do. So we were on the verge of having no economy. That's never happened before in our history. So what did we do? We decided this calls for extraordinary measures, and we would try to use federal dollars as a substitute for the economy, just replace lost income on a massive, unprecedented scale, and we did. Almost $3 trillion we approved in that legislation. At the time, we included $1,200 per person. You could make an argument that that was an extremely inefficient use of those $1,200 per person, but at the time, given the circumstances, I understood why we didn't have many good options, and that was something we decided to do. So where are we now? We're in a very different place. Our economy is not in a free fall. Our economy is in a recovery mode. We're not back to where we want to end up. We're not back to where we were before March, but we've taken big steps in that direction. The economy grew at 33% last quarter. 33%. That's a tremendous recovery that is underway. More than half of all the people who lost their jobs earlier this year have regained their jobs. So we're not finished yet, but that's a huge step along the way. And now we're being told, after passing another extraordinary bill, this one almost $1 trillion, and including $600 per person, that that's not enough. We need to do $2,000 per person, despite the fact that we know for sure, we know for a fact, that the large majority of those checks are going to go to people who had no lost income. How does that make any sense at all, Mr. President? We know for sure that the majority of these people had no lost income. They didn't lose their jobs. And yet we're going to send them not $600, not the $1,200, but $2,000. So think about this. A married couple who both are working and have 2 kids, maybe they work for the federal government like 2 million odd people do. Maybe they work for a large company, the vast majority of which did not have large numbers of layoffs. So this 2-child, 2-income couple that makes 6 figures had no interruption, no diminishment of their income whatsoever. They're going to get $8,000 of money we don't have that is going to be either borrowed or printed. That's what it's all going to come down to. Mr. President, there are people who are still suffering from the economic fallout of this terrible COVID crisis. There's no question about it. We know there are people who are concentrated in a handful of industry for the most part, not exclusively, but people who have worked in the restaurant industry, people who work for hotels, travel, entertainment. So many of those people are still out of work, and their prospects of getting their old jobs back are not good in the short run. I sure hope they'll be good in the medium-term run, if not sooner. And our bill addressed that. It addressed that problem. How do we do that? With a new round of PPP loans, which are really grants to small businesses if they'll keep their workforce intact. Expansion of unemployment insurance benefits so that people who have historically been ineligible remain eligible so they can continue to collect unemployment benefits. An increase in the amount of unemployment benefits, a $300 a week overlay of federal money on top of whatever their state program is. $600 per person regardless of whether they lost income. All of that was passed just a few days ago. And now we're told we need to come back immediately right now and make sure that we're sending $2,000 checks to people who had no lost income. So for that reason, Mr. President, I object.
Objection is heard. Senator for Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. President, very much. And I rise to echo the sentiments of the senator from Vermont. He is right. The Republicans are wrong on this issue, on every single part of this debate. Senator Sanders is right. The Republicans are wrong. We're in the middle of an unprecedented crisis in our country. We have a health care crisis. We have an unemployment crisis. We have a hunger crisis. We have a housing crisis. We have an addiction crisis. We have a moral crisis in this country. The United States government should be responding to the needs, to the desperation of families in our country at this time. There's a crisis of faith that the American people have in its government's ability to respond to human suffering. Well, this institution has been created to respond to human suffering. That's our job. Tony Fauci has made it very clear that the worst of the pandemic is ahead of us, not behind us. We know what's coming, and yet we are not responding. We know this is not going away soon, and yet we are not responding. A program, Operation Warp Speed, was created to create a vaccine. But because for 7 months the Republicans have refused to fund the public health system of our country at the state and local level, we have Operation Snail Speed to put the vaccinations in the arms of the American people. It was anticipatable. Tony Fauci and others were warning us back in May, in June, in July. There would be a second wave, and the second wave could be bigger. We got the warning. The Republicans refused to heed that warning. And here we are now without the public health infrastructure to deal with the overflow capacity in emergency rooms and ICUs all across the country, while simultaneously asking those same medical institutions to put vaccinations in the arms of healthy people without the resources provided by the federal government to help those states and local communities to deal with that crisis. Sometimes Daniel Patrick Moynihan would say that when you deal with an issue, you deal with it with benign neglect. If you don't want to help or you don't want to hurt, deal with benign neglect. What's happened with the Republicans this year is that they've created a program which is designed neglect. It's an actual plan not to provide the funding, not to provide the help for those families, for those communities, for those institutions that are now being overwhelmed and asked on top of that to put this extra burden of putting vaccinations in people's arms, but without the extra resources. And what do? On the Republican side, they throw out these red herrings, so many red herrings that you need to build an aquarium in the well here of the Senate in order to deal with all of them that gets away from the central issue. Yes or no, up or down, will you provide $2,000 to Americans who are going to need it through what Tony Fauci is saying will be the worst part of this pandemic? Yes or no, up or down, where do they stand on this issue? Here's what we do know. Republicans seem more focused on funding the Defense Department than they do funding the defenseless in our country. And Americans are becoming more defenseless as each day goes by. The headlines are screaming that this panic that is absolutely understandable and based upon fact is sweeping our country. There is protection which the federal government should be providing to these families. We hear it. They're hungry. They could be without their homes. The addiction crisis is rising. They need help in their families. So from my perspective, we have a moment in time. And Donald Trump happens to agree with us, even though broken clock is right twice a day. And we do agree with him. He is right. We do need this help, which we should be providing to these families. And as we watch more and more of our American loved ones fall sick and die, families are facing a new and unprecedented hardship. They're having to make impossible decisions to whether to put food on the table or keep the heat on through the cold winter months. And the United States government has an obligation to help working people who, through no fault of their own, are seeing all of the things that they care about, all of the success that they have worked for, and all the financial security they've earned be washed away. And yet the Republicans want to put another Operation Snail Speed in place. The damage to these families is anticipatable. We can see what is unfolding. Dr. Fauci is telling us we're at the worst part of the pandemic and it's going to continue. So let us act in anticipation. Louis Pasteur used to say that chance favors the prepared mind. That is what Dr. Tony Fauci is telling us. Let us prepare. Let us help families prepare for what is about to arrive. Just in Massachusetts alone, 21,000 new people applied for unemployment insurance in the week before Christmas. Food banks across Massachusetts, across the country, are seeing double-digit increases in demand with families who never faced food insecurity before. People are literally starving, cold, and without homes. And meanwhile, the majority leader and Republican leadership would rather head home for the new year and ignore the financial and health crises that are taking a toll on our families. For millions of Americans, this will be a New Year's holiday where they won't know if they can put food on the table that night. Republicans are claiming that giving $2,000 in direct cash payments to working Americans would be too expensive, that it would inflate our national deficit, that our budgets are already bloated. I have to ask, though, where was this outrage when Republicans blew up our national deficit to give a $1.5 trillion tax cut to billionaires and corporations? These are the crocodile tears from the right as Americans are shedding real tears, thinking about where their next meal will come from. The eviction notice on the front door, or losing health care in the midst of this crisis. And Americans are actually tired of being told that $600 is, quote, sufficient as an amount of money, as relief, as billionaires receive their tax breaks and grow their wealth by the trillions of dollars during this crisis. The rich get richer, and the rest are there, left suffering. They've had enough of being told that there just isn't the money for support for the well-being of their communities when they can see tax breaks going to those companies that are actually laying off workers. And Americans are tired of being let down by their government time and time again, as Donald Trump and his Republican allies have abandoned them during this response to the pandemic. Americans need support. They need to be able to trust their government, and they need $2,000 now. So that's the issue. Yes or no, up or down, on providing $2,000 to Americans to help them make it through the worst part of this crisis. So, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that at 12:30 p.m. on Thursday, December 31st, the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of H.R. 9051, a bill to provide $2,000 direct payment to the working class, that the bill be considered read a third time and the Senate vote on passage of that bill without intervening action or debate. And further, that if passed, the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table, and that immediately following the vote on H.R. 9051, the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of the veto message on H.R. 9395, that the Senate immediately vote on passage of the bill, the objections of the President to the contrary notwithstanding, with no intervening action or debate.
Is there objection?